I'm not much of a fan of fighting games. They tend to bore me really quickly. Even in the days of Sega and the NES, I still preferred the side-scrolling beat-em-ups over games like Mortal Kombat. I know why that is today, simply because the fighting games lacked a proper story. It was just two dudes hitting each other until one was dead. Interestingly enough, over the years, even the developers of fighting games realized that a story adds a lot of value to your product and began offering story modes. This is also where my interest for the genre increased again, but sadly, I still find myself bored after a while. The reason why I'm telling you this is because that means that I'm essentially slightly biased. Clearly a person who loves this kind of games will enjoy them much more than I did, so if I seem overly critical, consider this factor into it. Growing up with the Dragon Ball series, I was curious about Dragon Ball FighterZ. I had already seen the memes about the new hot character in the story mode. Videos of the game all looked quite nice, so I decided to give the game a try. Considering the fact that it's a fighting game, playing it with a gamepad seemed like the best choice, so I went for the PlayStation 4 version. It's not too hard to make a Steam game work with a PS4 gamepad on the PC, but it can still involve some work and the prompts are usually for Xbox gamepads, so it's inconvenient and only worth the effort when the game is graphically demanding and can offer much better visuals at better frame rates on the PC. Dragon Ball FighterZ is not such a game. The graphics are appealing due to the art style, and playing it on the PC would yield no significant advantages. The only downside to playing it on the PS4 in my case is that I would not be able to try it in online multiplayer. Why would you ask? Is that the case? Because I refuse to pay Sony or anyone simply for the basic right of playing multiplayer with people. So I only play games offline on my PlayStation 4. If I want to play online, I can do so on my PC without having to pay a special subscription fee for that. If more people were like me, we would not be having this problem in the first place, but that's another story. So I don't get to play the online multiplayer, but that's not a problem because I was not interested in it when it comes to this game anyway. Once you start the game, you'll notice your character is in something like a hub. The game was clearly designed with online interactions in mind. Usually this hub would be filled with other players who will emote, use sprays, as well as short phrases in order to communicate between each other. You get a ton of chibi character avatars, various emotes and sprays, etc. You will soon find out that as you play and complete challenges, you also gain money in this game, which can be used to purchase all of these things. But you don't get to purchase what you want, but rather get a loot box and hope you get lucky and don't get repeatables. Naturally, you can also spend money, and I mean real money, and buy loot boxes with that. I hate microtransactions of any kind in games, but as long as it only enables cosmetic improvements, I'm willing to close an eye for that. The only thing that one must consider is that in case you did not pre-order the game, you have to actually unlock Goku and Vegeta's Super Saiyan God forms by either completing arcade tournaments on hard mode or collecting a ton of money. Collecting in-game money is not that hard and can be done by playing the story, doing combo challenges, playing tournaments, etc. Pretty much everything will yield some kind of money. Step by step you'll gather enough. It took me about 3 days of active playing to get there, but it's doable, and for people who play this game more actively than I do, it should not pose a challenge. After that I spent all of that money on a bunch of loot boxes and unlocked almost everything the game had to offer. So paying real money is really unnecessary here, no matter your goal. The story mode was the main reason for which I purchased this game, and that's why I immediately went to it. And I gotta say, Dragon Ball FighterZ does a great job at easing you in and steadily raising the difficulty. It even offers in-game tutorials which reward you with more money per fight and are genuinely useful. Special moves are very easy to pull off, so that even total fighting game noobs, such as myself, started performing cinematic super moves and finishing enemies off in epic ways without much of a problem. Soon you will feel like you've got this. And this is when the difficulty will seem almost laughable at first. The thing is that this feeling of badassery is deceiving. You aren't a badass. The game just lets you win so that you can feel good about yourself before the real pounding starts. If you try the combo challenges, you will soon realize two things. One is that you suck at this game, and two, that you have been using a tenth of the actual movesets of each character you have been playing as. The combos quickly get so complicated that I was beginning to worry about developing a carpal tunnel syndrome. Out of all characters, I only managed to finish every combo challenge for 2 characters, and that after many attempts. The good news is that you get a lot of money even if you only complete part of these challenges, and you do learn a few things, so doing the combo challenges is almost a must in this game. Back to the story mode, it offers many cutscenes, some of which are secret and will only trigger if your team has the right characters in it. Before I continue here, I want to talk a bit about the story itself. It has several interesting ideas in it. First and foremost, it breaks the fourth wall by making making it so that the characters interact with you, the player. The whole idea is that there's a hidden device which emits waves all over the planet. These waves effectively shut down everyone, and any significant power is just diminished, so the person is absolutely helpless. Clones of these characters find these fighters and they're pretty strong, and they're also made to spread out through the planet. I'm intentionally skipping some stuff because I don't want to spoil the game. For some reason, we, the player, are a soul which can jump between the characters and control them. As the soul links more and more with the host, it unlocks more and more of their power. The plot sounds dumb, and it can be, but it is in a way genius because it serves as an equalizer. This means that while the soul is not used to a body yet, and that soul being you, it cannot use the full potential of that vessel and is essentially controlling a much weaker version of it. That's how you can control Goku and Vegeta and still struggle against Tien, Shinhan and Yamcha. It's not a perfect solution to the problem, but it works well enough to help you forget about the vast differences in power between those fighters and still have a challenging fight with somewhat of an explanation why that is. Naturally, the story is still full of plot holes, so if you want to have any chance of enjoying the game, you have to disable most of your brain or be an actual child. I mean, I remember how I used to enjoy Dragon Ball as a kid, whereas now I can't look at it for more than 5 minutes without starting to feel my IQ dropping significantly. The game also features some RPG elements. Your character gain experience and level up. The enemy does that too. This is where most of the game's problems appear. You are on this map with unlimited amounts of turns, and you can see that on some of these steps that you have to reach, you have various missions. Some involve unlocking a character, some are story related, and some are simply grinding missions. I did mention there are evil clones of every character, so the game uses that as an excuse for you to fight the same enemies 100 times. And while you have a limited amount of turns, that amount is so generous that you will really never have a problem with that, because the game actually wants you to grind. The thing is that every map only has a handful of points of interest. Once you step on one of these, which is related to the next step of the story, you are rewarded with a cutscene and get to advance the story, and it's rinse and repeat. You just go on a map, you go from left to right to left, up, down, some direction, you fight a bunch of enemies until you reach that one place where you have a story event, and then you advance the story and are moved to a next map where everything repeats over and over. This quickly gets boring. You will constantly fight the same enemies and see the same map with minimal variations. You can only have a team of 3 characters, but as you progress through the story, you can unlock a lot more than that. Naturally, you will continue to figure out which 3 you like best and just level up these, leaving the others far behind in terms of levels. The characters recover a small amount of health between fights, so if you're not careful, it could be that your Goku is almost dead for the next fight and you have no choice but to switch him for another character while he rests for a fight and recovers hit points. This is not much of an issue at first, but once you complete all story arcs, you get the option to play on hard difficulty. Here the enemies will be many levels above your guys and pose a real threat. This is where switching characters becomes very important. However, since it's impossible to level all characters at once, you can either continually switch characters and have it all at a similar level, but then all of them will be lower, and I mean significantly lower than the enemy, which is much lower, as I said, than what you will get if you only use 3 fighters and level them as much as you can. Then they will be much closer to the enemy's level, but the rest of your team will be extremely under level. No matter what choice you make, it will never be the right one, and you will find yourself facing enemies which have more health, a much higher damage output, and just anything that you can offer will seem insignificant. Obviously hard mode should be hard, but this feels unfair above all. You can use buffs which are applied before the battle and boost your XP, your money, your DPS or other stats, but those improvements don't equalize the battlefield, since your enemies get to use the system as well and boost themselves or even lower your stats. So there are these bonuses that actually can lower the enemy stats, but they're not very significant. So when you use them, the enemy is a little bit weaker, but then you've chosen to weaken yourself significantly because you didn't boost yourself. Adding to all of this is the fact that many characters are unlocked very late in the story, so that you never get much of a chance to level them up, since all characters start at a low level regardless of where they have been unlocked. So you will get a character late in the story, your guys will be like level 40, and this guy's level 1, and now you gotta start leveling him up. That's ridiculous. Who would want to start with a level 1 against enemies that are anyway like level 50 and 60? That would be like 50, 60 levels different. It's crazy. So the gameplay has its flaws, but sadly the problems are not limited to that. The story is divided in 3 arcs arcs, and each arc tells the same story from a perspective of different people. However, since we are breaking the fourth wall hard, we interfere with the story and essentially change it so that each arc seems to follow a general idea of things, but the story in each ends up being quite different. You can also get to see a lot of unique cutscenes and even get a chance to make a decision during one. Of course, well, I mean when I say one, that there are several, but it's usually just one choice within one cutscene. That's what I mean when I say one. Of course, the choices are either sounding different or just sounding the same but leading to the same result, and it's just really stupid. In other words, there are no real choices here because no matter what, you get the same result. Whether you get two choices that sound slightly different but do the same, or you get two choices that sound pretty much the same. It's like you get to say yes or you get to say I would love to, you know, that's what I mean. Those examples are not one-to-one, I just invented them, but it gives you a good idea of what your choices are to begin with. At best, you just hear a character respond slightly differently. For example, instead of saying yeah, okay, let's do it, they will say, hey, what do you mean let's not do it? Let's totally do it, and they'll still do it. And that's an example where you have two choices that are slightly different but still yield the same result. So the choices are just an illusion. You don't get to do choices. And when I say an illusion, it's worse than Telltale games where they at least appear at first to be meaningful and then you figure out that it makes no difference anyway. But okay, so another thing that I really was annoyed about was that during the cutscenes you have to press a button after each sentence in order for the cutscene to continue. Goku says something, you press X. Bulma responds, you press X, and so on. I couldn't believe there is no way to simply activate an autoplay version, and even checked online, as it seems just weird. And as of making this video, there is no such option. This is ridiculous. There are a ton of players complaining about this, especially due to the fact that some cutscenes can take several minutes and you have to constantly wait and then press X in the right moment. And consider that if you press X sooner, you actually skip some of the cutscenes. So you gotta be right, you know, you can be late but you can never be early, because if you're early you're skipping, and that's bad. You're gonna miss out on the story, and that's one of the main things for me. On the other end, the new character is a real eye candy. They gave her a nice body, pretty face, and a very good voice actress. Of course, we have to consider all this when it comes to things like Dragon Ball art style. You know, that's not something that you usually would consider to be the hottest art style, but for that art style, the new character is made very appealing to the eye. Oftentimes, the script is cringe-inducing, but people who have had any experience with Dragon Ball should know what to expect. You even get to play as her in the third story arc and get her as a playable character in all other game modes once you finish the story. One of the game's cooler features is that option to switch between the English and the Japanese dub. So for all of you guys who think that the universe's strongest fighter should be voiced by a woman, the option is there and can be activated without any problem. The other game modes are just more of the same and won't knock anyone off their chair, but can provide some entertainment and quite the challenge at higher difficulties. What's really cool is that the characters will often say something before the fight starts, and depending on who is fighting whom, you might get some unique dialogues similar to those of the story mode. Additionally, there is some level of interactivity. For example, finishing a round with an ultimate counts as a destructive finish and can damage the arena permanently for the next round. If you have the right characters fighting and fulfill a few other conditions, you can even activate what is known as a dramatic finish. In this particular case, scenes from the anime are played, or rather recreated, and I have to admit this looks pretty cool. It's just all made to feel very authentic. But in order for this to happen, you have very specific conditions to fulfill. It has to be the correct arena as it was in the anime. You have to have the two fighters who were in the anime to recreate the scene, so it's really cool. And I can definitely recommend you to try a few of these, or at least to go on YouTube and check them out, because they are quite curious. Another curious game feature is the ability to collect Dragon Balls. Now, it's nothing like what you would imagine, but rather when you do certain combos, you unlock a single Dragon Ball. Unlock all 7 and you can summon the Dragon Shenron, who will grant you one of 4 wishes. This can actually turn the tides of battle, but I've never been able to pull it off against the tough enemies, simply because the combos needed are quite specific and it's way too hard to do them all in a single battle. It's still quite an interesting idea, and I suggest you give it a try, but it's not something that's practical, at least for me. I was surprised to find that the game really doesn't have a lot of fighters to unlock. You only really really have the blue versions of Vegeta and Goku, as well as Android 21. That's all there is to it when it comes to unlocking. Most people might consider this a bad thing, but I think it's much better to have a full roster available from the start than to have to grind in order to unlock everyone, especially when you include useless and stupid characters that nobody wants to play and most people won't even remember. So this particular solution in this game, this feels like a good solution. That's alright, I'm for that. Dragon Ball FighterZ is a decent fighting game with an interesting, although quite uninspired story. If you're a fan of the Dragon Ball universe, you should definitely give this one a try. The simple controls allow for effortless execution of super moves and does very noob-friendly gameplay, but at the same time offers enough depth to give more experienced players enough to bite into and dominate the battlefield. However, I find it quite hard to recommend this to people who are not into Dragon Ball in general. Even if you enjoy fighting games, you might be deterred by the somewhat child-friendly graphics and the cheesy anime vibe of it all. The fighting system itself is quite good, but I don't believe that it will be enough to keep the attention of those who are a fan of games of this kind with more depth. It's just too simple if you ask me. I've invested about 20 hours into this game and I'm left with mixed feelings. It was not bad, but at the same time it wasn't enough for me to say that it was particularly good either. The game has too many strange problems which make me think that it was rushed. Things like having to constantly press a button in order to advance the cutscenes and being under-leveled in the story could have been noticed and fixed relatively quickly and easily under normal circumstances. So what do you guys think? Do you agree with me, or did I let my bias affect my judgment of this game? Let me know in the comments section. In any case, I'd like to thank you for watching my video and hope that it was at least somewhat informative and entertaining. Have a great day.